Have you ever had one of those moments? A single, phone-shattering, world-tilting moment where everything you thought was true just wasn't? Where the foundation of your life cracks and you're left standing in the dust, wondering how you didn't see the fissures before. For Cassie, that moment came on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. It wasn't accompanied by thunder or dramatic arguments. It was quiet, deceptively so, a simple, digital whisper of betrayal that would set in motion a chain of events so perfectly ironic, she couldn't have scripted it better herself. This is a story about trust, about the quiet, insidious nature of a lie, and about how sometimes the universe doesn't just hand you justice on a silver platter. Sometimes it asks you to be patient, to be smart, and to watch as the trap you didn't even have to set springs all on its own. So, get comfortable. This is the story of how my ex tried to cheat and how it spectacularly and poetically did not work out for him. Let me paint you a picture of Cassie's life before Tuesday. For 7 years, she had built a life with Mark. It wasn't a grand, cinematic romance, but it was theirs. It was comfortable. It was the familiar weight of his arm around her shoulders while they watched movies. It was the shared, silent laughter over a private joke in a crowded room. It was the rhythm of two lives, seamlessly intertwined. They had a nice apartment, the kind with big windows that let in the morning sun, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. They had a shared group of friends, a comfortable joint bank account for bills, and a cat named Gus who was profoundly indifferent to both of them. They were, by all accounts, a solid unit. The kind of couple you'd point to and say, "See, it can work." Cassie, at 29, was a graphic designer. She worked from home, her world often contained within the glowing rectangle of her computer screen. She was observant, thoughtful, the kind of person who noticed the small things. The way Mark would tap his fingers on the steering wheel to a specific beat when he was anxious. The slight crinkle at the corner of his eyes when he was genuinely happy, not just politely smiling. And Mark was a project manager, ambitious, charismatic, the life of any party. He was the kind of man who filled a room, his voice a confident baritone that commanded attention. For years, Cassie had loved that about him. She was the quiet anchor. He was the brilliant sail. They balanced each other. But lately, Cassie had noticed a subtle shift, a new distance. It was in the small things. His phone, which used to lie face up on the coffee table, was now always screened down. He had a new passcode. When she asked about it, he'd laughed it off. "Mark? Babe, it's just for work." New security policy. You know how paranoid the IT guys are. He'd started working later. Crunch time on the new project, he'd say, his voice tinged with a weary importance that made her feel like questioning it would be unsupportive. He bought new cologne. I started going to the gym more frequently. At first, Cassie, ever the optimist, chalked it up to a midlife crisis arriving a few years early. She'd even felt a little proud of his newfound dedication to self-improvement. But a tiny, cold seed of doubt had been planted in the fertile soil of her mind. It was a seed she tried to ignore, to drown with logic and 7 years of shared history. But seeds have a way of growing in the dark. The first real crack appeared 2 weeks before Tuesday. They were at a friend's barbecue. Mark was holding court, telling a funny story about a client. His phone, on the table beside him, lit up. A notification. Message from Sarah, work. Can't stop thinking about last night. You're a legend, winky face. Cassie's breath hitched. The world seemed to slow down. The laughter around her became muffled, as if she were underwater. Mark, sensing her stillness, glanced down. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes flickered with something. Panic? Annoyance? He snatched the phone up, his thumb flying across the screen. Mark? Ugh, Sarah from accounting. She had a bit too much to drink at the team drinks last night. Made a complete fool of herself. Poor thing. Probably doesn't even remember sending that. He said it just loud enough for her to hear, then seamlessly slipped the phone into his pocket and continued his story. The explanation was smooth, plausible, but it felt rehearsed. The seed of doubt sprouted a tiny, poisonous leaf. Cassie spent the rest of the barbecue smiling, laughing in all the right places, but inside, she was a churning sea of anxiety. That night, For the first time in their relationship, she lay beside him in bed, wide awake, the space between them feeling less like a comfortable gap and more like a chasm. The days after the barbecue were a masterclass in quiet tension. Cassie became a detective in her own life, piecing together clues she never wanted to find. She noticed he never mentioned this Sarah before. She saw the way he'd leave the room to take calls. The gym sessions became more frequent, and he'd come home smelling not of sweat, but of a fresh, overly long shower. She felt sick. The trust, that delicate crystal vase of their relationship, had a hairline fracture, and it was spreading with every evasive answer, every locked screen. She confided in her older sister, Maya. Sitting in Maya's cozy kitchen, the scent of chamomile tea doing little to calm her nerves, Cassie poured her heart out. "Cassie, I feel like I'm going crazy, May. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe it's all in my head." "Maya, it's not in your head, Cass. Gut feelings exist for a reason. He's hiding something. The phone? The new gym obsession? The cryptic text from a coworker you've never heard of? That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern." Maya, ever the pragmatist, gave her the nudge she needed. "Maya, you need to know. For your own sanity. You can't build a future on a foundation of lies. Find out the truth. However you have to." The thought of snooping made Cassie's stomach twist. It felt like a violation, an admission that their love was truly broken. But the not knowing was worse. It was a constant, gnawing emptiness. The opportunity came the following Monday. Mark had left his old, personal laptop on the coffee table. His main work laptop was always with him, but this one he used for browsing, for movies. And, crucially, he was logged into his Facebook Messenger on it. Her hands were ice cold, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. With a deep, shaky breath, she opened the lid. The screen glowed to life. There it was, the little blue icon. She clicked it, and the world fell away. The messages weren't with Sarah from accounting. They were with a woman named Chloe, and they were graphic. They were plans. They whispered secrets about her, about Cassie. Mark complained about her nagging, about how she didn't understand him anymore. He painted a picture of a lonely, unappreciated man trapped in a dying relationship. The climax of their digital affair was a plan for him to leave. He told Chloe he would break up with Cassie that very weekend. He was going to tell her it was over, that he'd fallen out of love, and that he was moving in with Chloe. Cassie sat there, the glow of the screen, the only light in the darkening room. She didn't cry. Not at first. The shock was too profound. It was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. 7 years. A shared home, a shared life, shared dreams, all reduced to a series of lies in a chat window. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning his exit strategy, and she was the inconvenient tenant he was about to evict. Then, the tears came. Hot, silent, furious tears of betrayal. She felt like a fool. The shared jokes, the lazy Sundays, the future they'd mapped out. Had it all been a lie? Or had he just decided, recently, to throw it all away? The initial wave of grief was quickly followed by a cold, sharp, and surprisingly clear wave of anger. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was a declaration of war on her peace. And Cassie was not going to go down without a fight. This is where Cassie's story transforms. This is where the heartbroken woman became a strategist. The initial, raw pain hardened into a core of cold, focused resolve. He thought he held all the cards. He thought she was just going to wait patiently to be dumped so he could seamlessly transition into his new life. No, she closed the laptop. She wiped her tears, and she started a plan. Her first move was information. She needed to protect herself. She meticulously went through their shared finances, documenting everything. She contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, who listened to her story and gave her a simple, powerful piece of advice. Evelyn, do not confront him yet. Do not let him know you know. Let him hang himself with his own rope. Gather your evidence. Secure your assets. When he makes his move, you will be ready. So, Cassie played the part. When Mark came home that night, smelling of his post-gym shower, she was the picture of normalcy. She made his favorite pasta for dinner. She asked about his day, listening to his lies with a serene smile plastered on her face. It was the hardest performance of her life. Every cell in her body was screaming, but she held it together. She was an actress in a tragedy where only she knew the final act. She found a new apartment, a small, bright one-bedroom that was just hers. She began secretly moving her most precious belongings, photo albums, her grandmother's jewelry, her books, box by box, while Mark was at work. She was a ghost, slowly fading from the life they'd built, leaving only a shell behind. And then, the perfect opportunity presented itself. Mark announced he was going on a team-building retreat for a long weekend, a Friday to a Sunday. He was almost giddy with excitement, the lies so obvious to her now. Mark, it's going to be so boring, babe. Just a bunch of trust falls and PowerPoint presentations in some stuffy hotel conference room. But the boss is insisting. Cassie knew, with absolute certainty, that there would be no trust falls, unless they were of the horizontal variety with Chloe. This was it. This was his moving weekend. Instead of confronting him, she leaned into his lie. Cassie, oh, that sounds tedious, but you should make the most of it. Go out for a nice dinner with the team one night. My treat. She even transferred $100 from their joint account to his for a fun night out. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She was funding his cheating getaway. But in her mind, it was the final investment in her own freedom. The Friday he left, she helped him pack. She folded his shirts, the same ones he'd be wearing for another woman. She kissed him goodbye at the door, a dry, perfunctory kiss. Cassie, have a great time, honey. Mark, thanks, babe. I'll miss you. And as his car pulled away from the curb, Cassie didn't collapse in tears. She stood tall. She locked the door, and she got to work. She had exactly 72 hours. She enlisted Maya and a few close, trusted friends. It was like a military operation. They rented a truck. They packed every single one of her belongings that remained. They cleaned the apartment until it sparkled, removing all traces of her existence. They took the pictures off the walls, leaving pale, ghostly rectangles. They took half of her furniture. They even took Gus the cat, who meowed his protest from his travel carrier. By Sunday evening, the apartment was a hollowed-out shell. It looked like a staged show home, impersonal and empty. All that was left in what was once their shared bedroom was a single, folded note on the bare floorboards, waiting for him. But Cassie wasn't done. The final, masterful touch was financial. Following her lawyer's advice, she went to the bank first thing Monday morning. She closed their joint account. Legally, she was perfectly within her rights to take half. But Cassie took only what was hers, her contributions over the past few months, leaving his salary and his initial deposits untouched. She wasn't a thief. She was a liberator. She opened a new, private account for herself, a symbolic act of her new, independent life. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. And now, all she had to do was wait for the spring to snap shut. Imagine Mark's perspective. He returns on Sunday evening, probably still riding the high of his weekend with Chloe. His head is full of the future, his new life, his new love. He rehearsed his breakup speech in the car. He's prepared for tears, for drama, for the messy, unpleasant task of ejecting Cassie from his life. He pulls up to the apartment. Everything looks normal from the outside. He gets out of the car, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He puts his key in the lock. It turns. So far, so good. He pushes the door open and is met with silence. An echoing, profound silence. The kind of silence that isn't just an absence of sound, but an absence of life. The entryway rug is gone. The coat rack, half empty, is gone. He walks into the living room. The couch, the TV, the bookshelves, all gone. The walls are bare. The air smells of bleach and emptiness. For a moment, his brain must have short-circuited. Was he in the wrong apartment? Had he been robbed? A bizarre, targeted robbery that took only Cassie's things and left his giant TV? He probably dropped his bag, the sound unnaturally loud in the hollow space. He would have called out, his voice tentative, Cassie. No answer. He would have rushed to the bedroom. Empty. The closet doors hanging open, her side starkly vacant. His heart would have been pounding, not with sadness, but with a dawning, terrifying confusion. And there, in the center of the empty room, a single piece of paper. He would have snatched it up, his hands trembling. It wasn't a long, emotional letter. It was concise, devastating. Mark, I know about Chloe. I know you were with her this weekend, not at a retreat. I know you were planning to leave me for her. So, I've saved you the trouble. I've left. I've taken my things and my half of the savings. The rest is yours. Don't try to find me. My lawyer will be in touch. Cassie. The floor must have dropped out from under him. The master of his own universe, the man with a plan, had been utterly and completely outmaneuvered. He'd been playing checkers while she was playing chess. The shock would have been absolute. Then, the panic. His first call wouldn't have been to Cassie. It would have been to Chloe. A frantic, confused call. Mark, Chloe, she's gone. Everything's gone. She knows. She cleaned out the apartment. She took the money. And we can only imagine the conversation on the other end. The excitement of their weekend together, curdling into the stark reality of the situation. The other woman, now faced not with a brave man leaving his unhappy relationship, but with a panicked, financially impacted man who had just been thoroughly blindsided. The fantasy was colliding with reality, and reality is a hard, unyielding surface. The final, beautiful twist of a knife came the next day. Humiliated, desperate, and likely cut off from the joint funds he was counting on to fund his new start, Mark had to do the unthinkable. He had to call his boss. Mark, hey, boss? Yeah, listen, I'm not going to be able to make it today. I've got a bit of a personal emergency. His boss, a man who knew Cassie, who had been to their home for dinner parties, was not sympathetic. He'd heard the rumors, seen Mark's behavior. Boss, Mark, let me be blunt. Your personal emergency is of no interest to this company. What is of interest is the fact that you lied about a company-sponsored retreat to cover for what I can only assume was an illicit affair. We have a strict morality clause in your contract. Clean out your desk. You're fired. In the span of less than 48 hours, Mark had lost his home, his girlfriend of 7 years, a significant portion of his financial comfort, his side piece respect, and his job. The house of cards he had so carefully built didn't just collapse. It exploded, and he was standing in the center of the blast zone, covered in the dust of his own lies. Weeks later, Cassie was sitting in a sunny coffee shop near her new apartment. She was meeting Maya. She stirred her latte, watching the swirl of foam. She was thinner, there were shadows under her eyes, but there was also a new light in them, a light of self-possession. Maya slid into the seat opposite her. Maya, so, any word from the dumpster fire? Cassie gave a small, genuine smile. Cassie, through my lawyer, yes. He's not doing well. Apparently, he's living with a friend. The job thing, that was the final blow I didn't even see coming. Maya, karma's a beautiful thing, isn't it? He built his own prison. Cassie nodded, looking out the window. The anger had subsided, replaced by a profound sense of peace. She hadn't sought revenge. She hadn't screamed or shouted or set his things on fire. She had simply stepped out of the way of the oncoming train he was driving and watched as it derailed all on its own. She had taken back her power. By refusing to be the victim in his narrative, by taking control of her own exit, she had robbed him of his agency. He wanted to be the one to leave. Fine, but she decided how he would be left. The story of Mark and Cassie isn't just a story about cheating. It's a story about quiet strength. It's about the power of knowing your own worth. Cassie didn't destroy him. His own actions did. She just had the foresight and the courage not to be standing in the splash zone when it happened. She took a sip of her coffee. It was rich and warm and perfectly bitter. It tasted like freedom. So, if you're ever in a situation where you feel betrayed, where the ground is giving way beneath you, remember Cassie. Remember that your greatest power isn't in the dramatic confrontation, but in the quiet, strategic reclamation of your own life. The best revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the silent, satisfying click of a door you locked behind you as you walk away towards a better, brighter future. It's the peace that comes from knowing you respected yourself enough to not settle for his lies. It's knowing that sometimes, when someone tries to cheat you out of your happiness, the universe has a funny way of making sure it just doesn't work out for them. Thank you for listening.